So, kind of a short talk here, and I wanted to say that usually on Tuesday nights, as you know, if you've been coming, we focus on some aspect of the teaching of the Dharma, and we usually illustrate with examples. Tonight, I want to do something a little bit different. I want to switch that around. I want to begin with a story and then discuss a little bit of the insights that the story at the heart of that story. Because actually, this is how we live. I mean, we don't live principles, right? We live examples. We live experiences. And we're called on. Can we see what's really going on there? Usually, in our society, as a society, we're right on the surface. We kind of run along with the action. But as people who are seekers, we are invited to look more deeply. So I'm going to start with a story from my own experience and talk about it for a few minutes and what the heart of that was as I saw it. And this was a story when I was traveling this summer. I was going up to Boston, and of course, from Charlottesville, you don't get many places directly. So I was in the Philadelphia airport, and I had an hour to catch my plane to go to Logan, which should have been perfectly enough time. But then some unfortunate things happened, or unusual things happened, and once, maybe not too unusual, our plane was late coming in. And then secondly, they had some trouble bringing the landing ramp up to the plane, so we're sitting on the plane for 15 minutes, and finally they got it up there and we deplaned. And by the time we deplaned, I knew the flight that I was supposed to catch was already boarding, so I ran out quickly and I asked some attendant from the airlines, where would flight so-and-so be, and he looked at his telephone, and he looked at, he said, that's in another terminal. You got to go through the doors and over there and take the shuttle and stuff. So I ran out to the terminal, to the shuttle, and I got the shuttle. I got over the place, and then I was really in a rush, and I asked the woman who was sitting there at the desk, where would I catch flight so-and-so? And she said, you got to go down there and there. So I started running down there, and then all of a sudden she started running after me. She said, wait, I just told you the wrong thing. It's back in, and it was back in the terminal I had just come from. And actually, here's where the story starts. So I get onto the shuttle bus to go back, and there's only one other person on that shuttle bus. It's a woman, I would say probably in her 40s or something. And this was kind of unusual in itself, because usually anytime I've been on a shuttle bus at an airport, it's pretty full. There are lots of people, but she and I were the only ones, and she was standing right up at the front where I entered. So we got on the bus, and I knew I didn't have much time left. And then she asked me where I was going. And I explained to her, and I told her that I probably wasn't going to make it, because she looked at her watch. She said, you have 11 minutes. I said, well, chances are, I probably am not going to make it. And then she started talking about herself and her situation. And she told me she's from California, and she said she had just flown in. She was coming down here to Virginia, actually, and she was coming down here to be with her grandmother. Her grandmother was being taken care of by a caregiver. And she said it's a really bad situation, and she'd been down here before. She said, and she began telling me this story as we were going along, and she said that he was violent, the caregiver, and that the story she started telling me involved a gun, and it got worse and worse as she talked about it. And she said, you see what I have on? I said, well, yeah. She had on a tracksuit and gym suit. She said, I'm going to kill him. And, it just kept getting worse. And I was just amazed. And then what I did is I looked at her, and I wanted to say, don't. But I said, I looked at her, and I took her hand in both of mine, and I just said, blessings. And I looked straight at her, and she looked at me. And there was just this moment there where I can't explain the moment, but it was an extraordinary moment between us. And then she turned to me after a moment or two, and she said, you're going to make that plane. I said, well, okay, I'll go with that. It sounded good to me. So we got over to, she was going to the same terminal I was. We got over to that terminal, and she was walking in with me, and they called the final call for the boarding of my plane. She said, "That's your plane." I said, "I know." And I started to run, and she started running with me. And we ran over first to where there were some gates, and then she said, "Wrong one." And then we turned around, and we started running the other direction, too. And then as we were running, there was right in the middle of this place an information desk. I kept running, and I heard her. She stopped at this information desk. She said, "This woman is trying to make such and such a plane. Tell them to hold it." And the fact is, I did make the plane. But that's not, to me, what the story was. The insights were. And the first insight was the incredible presence that was there. I mean, this was just pure presence together. She and me, we were totally present for each other during those few, and it wasn't long. I mean, maybe 15 minutes all told, I'm not sure. It was just quite amazing that we were there like that. And a second thing I would just add was that, here at IMCC, we're doing a lot of work with diversity and inner work, looking at white privilege and social justice. And I'll say this woman is a black woman. And she and I didn't have any, I don't think we had no time, first of all, but it was just pure connection between this woman and myself. And whether or not, I have no idea, can have no idea what happened when she got down here to her grandmother. But I could see there was such a huge change. She was angry when I first got on. You could just see it in her whole self was angry. And by the time we were running together in the airport, it was a whole different ballgame, a whole different picture. It was so beautiful. So this was just a really powerful experience. And after it was over, and it took a few days, I had another insight about this. And that was, this experience was utterly impersonal on my part. It was as though this woman needed help. And the universe, and I'll just say the universe, conspired. There was a series of unusual events that all came together. If I were trying to choreograph it, it wouldn't have happened like that. From all these things missteps that came together, so that when she and I were on that bus, we were there alone, and she said what she said, and then I didn't think when I just said blessings. I just knew I couldn't say, "Don't do it." It didn't feel right at all, and it happened as it happened. But then what I felt was just, in one way, humble, that I was part of something that was really huge, could have been huge. And I had nothing to do with it, except that I happened to be put there. I don't mean, please don't say, I'm not saying that God came down and said, "Go there." Whatever it was, and this is, I think, how the universe works. The Hindus have a beautiful term, and that term is Leela. Leela means cosmic play, divine play. That's what this world finally is. We think we are in control, and we want to be, and we are, in many ways, organizing our lives. But finally, we're not. Finally, it's so far beyond us. And that's what I really realized about this event, that was just utterly humbling. It's not about me. Just we are doing what we're doing and offering what we can. And then the universe takes over. So there's a saying by the Ojibwe Indians, maybe some of you have seen it. And it said, "Sometimes I go about in pity for myself, while all the while a great wind carries me across the sky." I thought, that's what this was, a great wind. And whether we're in pity for ourselves or any of the other multitude of things we go through in any given day, there's the great wind that carries us across the sky. And I think we can trust that wind. We know that it's there. We're part of the Leela, the play. So telling you this one because, first of all, it's really powerful for me, very powerful for me. But it occurs to me that all of us have stories, all of us have our experiences, which when we look at past the everyday, what's going on and what's the next step, we can see that there are insights. We see more deeply into them. And I think that's what we're being called to do, right? As seekers, we are spiritual seekers. I mean, we do come here for the quiet, of course. But as Julie was saying, it begins to grow on you. You begin to realize, wait a minute, in addition to quiet, there's a heck of a lot more going on here. And it begins to catch us up. And so what I wanted to do, and maybe some of you are guessing, here I hear what's coming now. I thought we could break into small groups. Maybe groups of 5. And what I would like to invite you to do, all of us to do, this will take a few minutes before we start, but think about a story into which you saw something at the heart of that story that wasn't just the surface, what happened, not just the surface actions. And hoping that you will share this with people in your small group. The heart of the story. Maybe an insight, something maybe that you hadn't seen before. So why don't we do that now? I'm going to invite you to just break up into small groups, and we'll just be quiet once you do, of about 5. And then just be quiet for a moment. Maybe you need to think for a minute about some story you would like to share. And then, after you share your story, sharing the insight, what you saw in the depth of that story. Any question about what that might be? Not the story, but about the direction, the guideline. Okay, let's do it then. And I am wondering if anyone would like to share something, maybe their story or what went on in their group, or any comment about this get-together that we just had.
So I don't know if anyone's heard me tell this story before, but when it was 2001, and I moved from California back to Kansas, and I rented a small house from a woman. I did massage in my home office for the first year I lived there. So she at one point had her sister visiting, and she sent her sister to me for a massage. And I'm not that woo-woo, even though I do massage. People think that's all woo-woo. So after the massage, I didn't talk to this woman while I was working on her. Afterwards, she said, first of all, that was a great massage, but the whole time I was on your table, it was like I was getting these messages for you. And I was like, what? What do you mean? And she said, well, it was like, I'm supposed to tell you Callie and the color green and bluebirds. And I'm like, okay. I didn't really know what any of that meant. So she left, and I started to kind of analyze and think what these things mean. And I'm thinking, okay, Callie, that's like the goddess of destruction. I've just left my life of 15 years and moved back to Kansas. And green, I'm Irish. There was like the connection with my grandmother moving back to Kansas. And then bluebird, I was like, I have zero interest in birds. I'm not a bird watcher. I don't care about bluebirds. So this is 2001, and several years later I started dancing, and I went to North Carolina. I met a bunch of great people, and so I'm thinking, oh, this is the bluebird of happiness. I'm in North Carolina. And then another year goes by, and there's this meditation group I'm in, and there's this guy in the meditation group, and he's lost his wife, and so I'm like, biding my time till he's through this process of, being, aware that I'm interested in him. So long story short, we finally go on what we both consider a date. And we're walking, and I decide to tell him this story, and he stops, and he's like, my mother collected bluebirds. And I was like, okay, that's kind of freaky. And so I was like, he said, my mother must have decided that, we should be in each other's lives, and now we're married.
And so they are, husband and wife. Thank you, Cecilia. Phil is laughing. Anybody else want to tell a story? Share a story. Okay. Okay, so this is a story. Actually, this is what I told some years ago here, but I'll tell it again. Another airplane story. So I had been in India, and the story happened at the airport in Amsterdam. To get to Amsterdam, we had, first of all, we had traveled for 7 hours from, it was a retreat center in India to get to the Mumbai airport. That was a long trip. Moreover, the man who was the driver had some kind of bronchial condition. And of course, by the time we got to Mumbai, I had the bronchial condition. Then we had an 8.5-hour flight from Mumbai to get to Amsterdam overnight. Didn't sleep. I was really tired and groggy. So we got in, deplaned in Amsterdam, and I was so sick and so tired that all I wanted to do was to get home, or actually what I wanted to do was just know where my next flight is. I was going to get there and kind of collapse there. So there was an attendant at the airport in Amsterdam, and I just went up to him, and as far as I was concerned, he was just an object. All I needed, if he had been a sign that said where my plane was, it would have been fine. But so I stopped, and I just asked him, how do you get to such and such a flight from here? I guess rather quickly. I don't even know. I was kind of out of it. And he was silent for a minute. And what I thought afterwards is he probably said, wow, another demanding American. That's what I think maybe went through his mind. But anyway, what he said was, good morning. And it just cut right through everything like a knife. I became completely present. And I smiled at him, and it was a real smile. And I just said, good morning, and it just shifted the whole consciousness, the whole situation. And then he told me where the plane was. And I went. That was all there was. That was what there was to it. But it was huge. It was a total shift in consciousness in that one moment. And it occurred, okay, so afterwards it occurred to me, there are some Zen stories. In Zen, you read about the ancient Zen masters who would use in the meditation hall, they had a long, thin stick. It was called kyosaku. And what they would do would be to a student who was groggy, they would slap him right there on I think it's the trapezius muscle, and wake him up. And in fact, in the Zen, I was in Zen for a while, and we used it. And actually, the senior students used it. We didn't get it as a surprise. We'd raise our hands, but we used it. It struck me that what this man was, he was like a Zen master. Not that he knew that. I can't imagine he knew that. But it was just like a kyosaku when he said good morning. It had exactly the effect that a kyosaku is supposed to. It woke me up, I just became present. And so that's my story, how little things can really bring us into pure presence. So enough of that. Thank you all for coming. Hope that you will have a beautiful and mindful and heartfelt week. We will see you next week.